Does the joke about champions getting skins, getting buffs, have some truth to them? Seems too coincidence that it happens. Like Shaco not being touched for a year, getting a legendary and a buff. Pinkward, the idea that champions are buffed when they get skins is complete and utter air. Like, it's not a thing. It's not real. It has never once been real. What you're running into is confirmation bias. You're basically, it's really easy to be like, I believe this is true. Champions are buffed when they get skins. And then you can find all the cases that they're buffed when they get skins and be like, see, my data has shown that all these cases, this champion is buffed when they get skins. But if you actually did the work, if you actually like did the due diligence and checked out what's going on, you'd also need to go check all the times champions get skins and are nerfed and champions that are get skins and aren't touched at all. And what you'll find overwhelmingly is that there is no rhyme or reason to a champion buff, nerf, or keeping them the same based on their skins. Like, there's no correlation there. So it's just not a thing. It doesn't happen. And yeah, we just don't do that. The only time I have remembered ever in, like, you know, my 13 years at Riot, a discussion about a champion getting buffed for a skin was when Spirit Guardian UDYR was made. There was a question of, hey, we have an ultimate skin coming out for UDYR, and he's felt kind of like mechanically awkward over the years. Are there small changes we could do to him in mechanic wise to make him feel like a more functional character? And so at that time, a couple months before, like, basically it was like, hey, we've been thinking about UDYR a lot lately. Perhaps there could be like some mechanic improvements to him. But yeah, no, we do not buff champions for skins. And they're like, there isn't even that like communication channel, by the way. Like, a lot of people who think we buff champions for skins are probably like, oh, so the skins team, like, they come to the balance team and they're like, guys, we're making a Jinx skin. You need to giga buff her so it sells. And like, there's not even that communication channel. There's not like a channel where the skins team like is telling the live team, hey, here's the skins that are coming out. Consider if they need buffs or anything like that. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. Lies. Every time Jinx gets a skin, August increases her AD by an invisible +1. See, now that's true. My thoughts is that balance team doesn't think about Shaco, but then sees legendary Shaco team get announced. They think, wonder how Shaco's doing. No, that's just not the case. I understand where you're coming from there. Like, I could see how you could like put that thought together and like make that train of thought and connect the dots, but it's just not, it just doesn't happen like that. And if you really want to understand how Shaco gets buffs, like actually, like no joke, Phlox thinks a lot about Shaco, and then sometimes he'll be like, hey guys, I think a lot about Shaco, and did you know that his AD build sucks right now? And then it'll be like, oh, okay, maybe we should do something about it. Yeah. So if you're ever wondering, like, why does Shaco so OP, probably Phlox's fault.
Can we get active items back outside of support again, please? I would love to do that. I will say one of the reasons, a lot of people have this perception that like, oh, Riot hates active items because bad players don't use them. It's like, I actually don't think that that's really the problem. I think the reality is more so, as the guy who makes a lot of the items and has made a lot of the items that have been made over the past couple of years, is that it is a lot harder to make active items. It is a lot harder to convince people that an active item is actually good, right? Basically, I think for a variety of reasons, our standards for active items are actually higher than for non-active items, right? Because active items tend to be, number one, a lot harder to tune, number two, a lot harder to upkeep. And so our standards are higher for them. Like, I actually have prototyped a lot of active items over the years that I've been making items in League, but none of them have shipped, right? I don't think I've never actually shipped an active. I've made a lot of them in my time, and I've never shipped one because, you know, even just myself, it's like, I feel like, oh, I need this to be really good if it's an active, because actives also have an innate cost in our system. They have innate MMR skew, they have a Mindshare cost. And so I think the active items, there's just a higher bar for them. And that's why we don't make as many actives as we maybe could or maybe even should, is that they're harder to make from a design perspective. That's like my biggest reason why. Not because we like hate active items for some reason, right? Again, I think that's what a lot of people believe, but I don't think that that's actually the case. I miss being able to build Stride, Gore, Rav, Eclipse, or any of the lethality items during Mythic season, having so many options and items felt fun. I've seen other people with similar sentiment. Have you thought of making an adaptive force item with a broad passive/active to make it universally purchasable? That is something that's been considered, and in fact, in Wild Rift, I actually did that. I made Gnasher's Tooth in Wild Rift an adaptive force item, amongst other things. The summary of how I believe that like why I believe that's not good for League is that in Wild Rift needed to make do with a lot fewer items because it had, more concern, kind of what we were talking about before with the complexity versus like readability and understandability scale. Wild Rift needed to be way further towards the understandability, so it needed to push down on a lower number of items. So for Wild Rift, I think doing something like collapsing a couple of different items into one item using adaptive force makes sense for Wild Rift, right? Where an extra, like one extra item has a really, really high cost. For League, I don't think it makes sense. I think we would rather have champions that want different stats feel and build differently, right? We don't want these champions to feel the same, right? This is one of the reasons why there was so much resistance for such a long time to adding Bloodletter's Curse to Summoner's Rift, was that this just makes AP fighters feel more similar to AD fighters in that they basically have access to Black Cleaver, right? Because that's ultimately what Bloodletter's Curse is. It's just AP Black Cleaver, right? Now, I think we did a decent job with making it feel a little different, the way that it applies and like how it has a cooldown and stuff like that. And I think ultimately, I think a lot of the build path does a lot of work here, a lot of heavy lifting on making it feel different from Cleaver. But ultimately, I still do wish that that Bloodletters was a little better differentiated from Cleaver, so that you felt a little different when you built like Bloodletters on Mordekaiser comparatively to when you build like Black Cleaver on Darius, right? We generally would like it so that champions that are in different systems, item-wise, actually feel different and feel like they have access to different things, because that is part of what makes the game interesting and compelling, right? That when you play a champion that scales with AD instead of AP, that your experience interacting with items is actually different, right? That's why we generally don't like the idea of adaptive, right? Though I will say I think there are things on items that could give adaptive that could make sense, right? As an example, let's suppose we have a really sharp item that gives attack speed and we want it to be as an example here, the original version of Runons gave 70% attack speed and had the Runons passive, right? Like, let's suppose we want to make like the ultimate attacker item, right? That's all about attack speed. It gives 100% attack speed for some reason, right? And we decide, actually we ship the item and we need to make it we need to like reduce the amount of attack speed. It's too much. We need to give it another stat. Adaptive Force might make sense in that world where it's like, we actually want this to be good on Kale. But we also want it to be good on AD Kaisa, right? It's like, I could see that, right? Where it's like, if adaptive is secondary or like a tertiary stat, I think that is something that we would be willing to accept, or at least something that I would consider. If it's, hey, this item has a very clear space, a very clear fantasy, and the adaptive force is just there to support that fantasy, and it's not the primary thing on the item. It's not like the thing that's propping it up for its users. I could see that working pretty well.